up, everybody? I am back. And the last video that I made, I mentioned that Lisa and I had ordered some new sails specifically for windsurf wave foiling, and they have arrived and we've gotten several sessions on them. So I wanted to update you on how they're working out. Now let me just summarize where we've come from and what we've been doing. So Lisa and I have been windsurfing for about 12 years. We got into windsurf wave foiling about 2.5 years ago. And up until recently, we had been using our windsurfing wave sails for foiling. And they worked out okay. They're Ezzy Zettas is mostly what we use for windsurfing. We have onshore wave conditions here, and so they're fantastic for that. They work perfectly for onshore windsurfing conditions. But for windsurf wave foiling, they have a ton of shape, and they don't lose that shape when you flag the sail out, and so they become very twitchy when you're surfing. And so we wanted something that was going to depower more when you're on the wave. And so we were looking for different options, and we talked to Casey Treichler, who basically invented windsurf wave foiling, and he found that the Hot Sails Microfreaks kid sails were working out really well for him. So he said, well, why don't we give those a try? Well, they only manufacture them in sizes 3.8 and smaller. So we said, well, what are we going to use for our larger sails? Because we wanted a 4.7 and a 4.2 also. So we started looking around, and we found that the Ezzy Takas were more of a down-the-line depowering wave sail. So we said, well, let's try those for our larger sails while we're waiting for the Microfreaks to come in, because they were on back order for a while. And so we got the Takas, the Ezzy Takas, earlier this summer. They worked out really well. They're sizes 4.7 and 4.1, and they really depower when you're on the wave. They lose a lot of that twitchiness. But they still have a really heavy windsurfing sail feel to them. So I was really excited to get the Hot Sails Microfreaks to try those out. So I've gotten 3 sessions on them so far, and I can tell you that they are phenomenal. So they're really light. They're designed for kids, and so they don't need to be quite as durable because kids are not as heavy, so there's not quite as much tension on the sail. They're made of a really light fabric. They have 3/4 batten. They depower, so they're almost totally flat. So when you flag that thing out when you're on the wave, it is not affected by the wind, hardly at all. And you can just surf. You don't have to worry too much about what the sail's doing because it's not twitchy like it is with the Ezzy Zettas that we're using, because the Ezzy Zettas maintain a ton of shape when you're on the wave. They have a ton of profile when you're on the wave. So these Microfreak hot sails are really working out well. I want to show you what they look like. I'm going to show you the 3 sails next to each other, the Ezzy Zetta, the Ezzy Taka, and the Hot Sails Microfreak, and then rig them and show you what they look like rigged and talk through a few of the features and how it applies to windsurf wave foiling. So these are the 3 sails that we're going to compare, and starting from left and moving to right, we've got the Ezzy Zetta, size 3.7, we've got the Ezzy Taka, size 4.1, and we've got the Hot Sails Maui Microfreak, size 3.8. So we're going to notice some differences in these 3 sails. And to start out, before we even rig them, take a look at the Ezzy Zetta. Take a look at the luff curve. I laid the mast next to it so you can see the straight mast next to the curve of the luff. This is the Ezzy Zetta. This is the Ezzy Taka. And this is the Ezzy Microfreak. And you'll notice that the Ezzy Zetta and the Taka have more luff curve than the Hot Sails Microfreak. Now, the Hot Sails Microfreak is shorter, so you wouldn't notice the difference as much at the top, but even so, you'll notice there is definitely less luff curve in the Microfreak compared to the Taka and the Zetta. So I've got all 3 sails rigged. They're all rigged similarly with similar downhaul and outhaul, and we're going to take a look at each one and take a look at how it applies to windsurf wave foiling versus windsurfing. So the first is the Ezzy Zetta 3.7 meters. You can see by looking at it that it's got 5 battens, and it's got a lot of shape to it. These sails are built with panel shaping. There's very little excess luff curve, so most of the shape comes from the panel shaping rather than from the luff curve. This is a great sail for onshore windsurfing conditions when I'm riding frontside and backside. I love how quickly it powers up when I expose it to the wind just a little bit. So this sail is going to keep constant power. It's never going to depower. It's always going to have shape to it, which is fantastic for onshore windsurfing. And it's okay for foiling, but we don't need that shape all the time. So this is what led me to consider the Ezi Taka. And the Ezi Taka, first thing you'll notice right away is there's this vertical crease in the fabric right near the mast. And you'll also notice that there are 4 battens instead of 5. So the sail's going to have less shape because it has 4 battens. It's also going to have a lot less shape because the batten above the boom, you can see, is a 3/4 batten. Now, what happens when this sail powers up, the fabric is pushed away from the mast. If I push on it here, you can see a little bit of how the fabric is now giving shape to the sail. So if there's wind in it, you're going to get a nice foil profile. That's going to give you a lot of power. So when you're trying to get on foil and you're pumping the sail, the pump towards you is going to push wind into the sail, give it profile, and then the sail is going to spring back towards you and give you that extra lift to help get you up on foil. So this was a nice improvement for foiling purposes. I do not like it as much for windsurfing, but for foiling purposes, for the purposes of windsurf wave foiling, this has worked out really well, because when you're on the wave and you flag the sail out, the sail loses its shape. Where with the Ezi Zeta, the sail retains its shape when you flag it out, and because it retains its shape, it's very twitchy when you flag it out and you're windsurf wave foiling down a wave. So we don't want the sail being jerked around while we're on the wave, and the Ezi Taka takes a lot of that out. Now let's move on now to the Hot Sails Microfreak. You'll notice immediately this has a much flatter profile. There's no panel shaping with this sail, or if there is, there's very little. I haven't noticed much. It's got that same vertical wrinkle near the mast. You'll notice again, this sail has 4 battens and a 3/4 batten above the boom, but it's a much flatter profile. You'll see near the bottom here, there's very little shape to it, where with the Taka, there's a lot of shape at that bottom batten, and the Zeta has even more shape than the Taka does. So it's a much flatter profile, which means, again, when you're on the wave, windsurf wave foiling, and you flag this sail out, it depowers immediately. So you can just surf. You don't have to have any wind in the sail at all. The sail doesn't get jerked around. It's not affected by the wind blowing across it when the clew is pointed directly downwind from you. And it's working out extremely well for windsurf wave foiling. The other huge benefit of this sail is how light it is. This fabric is extremely light. It's much lighter than the Ezi Taka and the Ezi Zeta. The durability is probably not going to be as strong as the Ezi Taka and the Zeta, because it's made for kids, and kids are, lighter. There's not going to be as much force on the sail because kids are lighter, and they don't need as heavy a fabric, and neither do we when we're windsurf wave foiling. We just don't need the heavy fabric that we do for regular windsurfing when we're windsurf wave foiling. So this has turned out to be the perfect sail for windsurf wave foiling. It has great power when you need to go upwind. You can see here that if I push on the fabric, it brings shape into the sail, and when I let it go, the shape disappears. And that's exactly what you want when you're windsurf wave foiling, so you can go upwind with the shape, and then you can surf the waves downwind with the sail flagged out, and you don't have any power, no jerking around of the sail. So I hope you enjoyed that side-by-side comparison of all 3 sails next to each other. And I want to wrap up by telling you that the biggest things that I noticed with the Hot Sails Microfreaks that make it so perfect is, number 1, it prevents the foil from overfoiling. It holds the board down. You don't get that phantom lift, as I call it, where all of a sudden the board will lift out of nowhere. It doesn't happen with the Hot Sails Microfreak, because it just doesn't hold that shape. It loses that shape, and if a big gust of wind does come, it gives you some time to adjust, because it doesn't power up all at once. It does not have that direct impact from the wind that the Ezi Zeta has, or a little bit less with the Ezi Taka, but the Hot Sails Microfreak is really minimal impact from a gust of wind. So you have time to react. The board doesn't overfoil. It was just excellent with that. And then the next feature was that you can flag it out, and it doesn't have that twitchiness. One of the things that's really a neat feel is that the Hot Sales Maui, when you jibe and the sail flips, there's no pop in the battens. You don't feel any pop at all. And at first it threw me off a little bit because I'm used to having to pop the battens, and when I do pop the battens on my Ezzies, it gives me a little bit of power to kind of power me up as I'm coming out of the jibe. Well, with the Hot Sales Microfreaks, there's no pop at all. The battens just come around really soft, and so I wasn't doing any pop, so I lost a little bit of power. So I actually had to remind myself to kind of pretend I was popping the battens to give me that little power when I'm coming out of the jibe, so that I can power up and, you know, make sure I stay on foil real nice. But all in all, I'm super excited about the Hot Sales Microfreaks, and I think you will be too. Really, really light feel and really depower well. So that's it for today. If you like this video, please like it down below and subscribe to the channel if you're not always a member, and I will see you next time.